When an artist is this good at creating a new world or making you feel like you have just stepped through a portal to an alternate dimension, I'm going to talk about it. Imagine you took Ghibli Studios, Adventure Time, and a little dash of Moebius and you blend them all up. That's what today's artist looks like. My name is Brant, and welcome to the 9th episode of Best Art on Earth, the show where I bring you all the best art that's happening on our planet right now. And why is it the best? Because I said. But also, I'm gonna explain it to you with the art fundamentals and break down why this art can be so appealing or why this is a good piece of art. Today's artist is Andy Williams, or his artist name is Andy the Illustrator. And he has a way with even just one picture taking you to a new dimension or a new reality. I think I can crack the code with this piece on why Andy's art is so appealing and what he does to take his illustration from good to great. So I'm going to take it and put it on the iPad. I'm going to break down for you fundamentally what he's doing right. So some artists like Andy will pick one fundamental, and then every other one of these fundamentals will support that initial one. And with Andy, it's perspective. Initially, what we're seeing here with this horizon line, and then all the other points are kind of coming off of this, we would call this 1-point perspective. A lot of times you'll see this in beginning art classes where you'll paint or draw telephone wires that go off into the distance, into 1 point. This is 1-point perspective. You also see this in a lot of photography with like train tracks. It is very good at showing depth, but it can be boring. But it's cool when you watch a professional artist use other fundamentals to break that norm. So the first thing that Andy does for this perspective is he changes a lot of things up with shape. If you look at a city like Santorini, where every single building looks like it was kind of made by the same builder or architect, it's really weird. Most cities or most buildings in general vary. There might be a style to the buildings in a certain area, but every one of them has their own unique feel. And if you look at this piece, every one of these buildings has a different feel to it, different awning to it. Especially up here, look at that, the shape to this building. All these different shapes are telling me that all these buildings come from different people, which is cool. And most artists don't think about that. They just draw buildings or cityscapes a certain way, and then the whole city looks like that. That is not the case with Andy's art. Another thing that Andy does, so not something that people will immediately point out or recognize, is that he's letting us see under a lot of stuff here. And in cartoons and in illustration, there's so many times that we only see the side of things or above things. You know, like here, we're looking on top of this deck right here. And yet, in real life, we're looking under things all the time. We're not the tallest thing in our environment almost ever unless you're standing out on a really wide open plane. That's why you feel like you're just in this piece. Here's the part where we have to do a little bit of art explanation. He's not just using one type of perspective, he's actually using two types of perspective. The second is called atmospheric perspective. A real quick summary of atmospheric perspective is basically what the atmosphere does to things in the distance. We know that the further something is away, the less detail you see, and that the colors tend to fade. Here you can see, I've numbered them, how each mountain range gets lighter and lighter in the distance. This is a normal thing that happens anywhere you go on our planet. Let's just start with the color. You zoom in here, you notice how almost all of these colors are like a bluish white, they almost blend into the sky. As you get closer here in the midground, you see that, yes, the ship is red and you've got another one here, the yellow, but they're like toned down colors. I would imagine that the roof here and the roof here are probably the same color or intensity of color as this, but because they're further back, he has toned down the color. And then when you get to the foreground here, you can see he's got all these super bright reds. This red right here you see on the sign next to this teal green are complete opposites on the color scale. And when you have two colors that are on opposite ends of the scale, it makes contrast, also makes emphasis, which really what he's trying to do is just kind of have your eye go through here. Obviously the dog here is the focal point, but really, he really lets you go back and forth with all that contrast of color. Now, if we're going to talk about color, we might as well go right into value as well. And watch what happens while I take the color away. The further back you go into this, the lighter all the values get. He's made all of his very, very darks and his lights in this U shape here in the front that he's trying to get you to look at. And finally, texture. We've talked about how texture makes things feel more organic. And again, I think Andy's goal here is to make it feel like a real city that people really live in. All these chips and cracks and things, I think a lot of people would avoid. I mean, look, and the graffiti, the different signage that varies. But to tie in with the atmospheric perspective, if you look, there's a lot more texture here and here in the wood. You have a lot less texture on these buildings in here than you do on the foreground. And then if you zoom into the back here, there's just a few little lines and a few little bit back here. And he's fading out with his texture in the same way he did with his values, in the same way he did with his colors, to give you that atmospheric perspective. So you can really see how he's doubled down on both versions of perspective to make this feel like you're actually going into a new place. If you love Andy's work as much as I do, go check him out on social media at Andy the Illustrator, and do me a favor and bug him about actually making that graphic novel he keeps talking about. You can go to Andy's website and actually pick up a piece of art if you really do enjoy his illustrations. Thank you, Andy, for letting us check out your awesome work, and I'll see you guys next week with some more cool art. Thanks.